Good evening, everyone. I'm Scotty Jones. I'm your city manager, and I'd like to welcome everyone this evening for me to discuss the railroad plaques that I'm studying. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize a few of our elected officials that are here. We have Councilwoman Becca Sitz, Councilman Jim Foss, and our Mayor Robert K. Nelson. We are happy to be able to hold this meeting because it allows our citizens to participate and have to provide some input on this process. It has taken us a very long time to get here, and I know everybody's happy to be here to give some of that input. I want to give a BCCDC a shout out. They were part of funding this study that we have that we went into contract with HDR. So thank them when you see Jessica and the CDC board. So we kicked off the process last fall with city staff, and we had the railroad reps from Union Pacific. We had the BNSF run, UP, along with our consultant with HDR. We had some council members that showed up a few of these crossings, and we worked very hard to get some of these diagnostics together to get us to the place we are tonight. We have a lot of stakeholders that are directly affected that we've met with as well. We hope to accomplish and get some input tonight from all of you. We have a short presentation to go over you, and make sure you give input after that and come up with any questions, because we have a lot to do before we get into the construction phase. With that said, and I do want to give a shout out to our Public Works Director, Kurt Lundquist. Thank you so much for this dinner. And January, all hides back there. He's done a lot of work on this project. Okay, with all further ado, I'll give this over to Russell Knott with HDR.
Thank you, Scotty. So, my name is Russell Knott with HDR Engineering. We've been working on getting the information needed to apply for the quiet zone. Not everybody is really clear what a quiet zone is. Hopefully after this presentation we'll get a little bit more aware of what it is exactly and what we need to do to be able to apply. So, the quiet zone, as you all are aware, does not exist in Bay City. So, the reason why the trains blow their horns as they go across main crossing is they are legally required. It is a law. The engineer has to blow the horn a certain amount of time to allow people to hear the horn and then get away from the crossing. That's 20 seconds, anywhere between 15 and 20 seconds before the train gets to the crossing. So, in order for them not to blow the horn, a quiet zone has to be established. So, within the quiet zone, they are directed. The engineers are directed not to blow the horn. So, will that mean that they will never blow the horns again? No. If there's an emergency, if there's pedestrians on the crossing, they're immediately going to get hit and struck, they're going to blow the horn. There's sometimes if there's cows or whatever on the track, they'll blow the horn. So in an emergency situation, they will blow the horn. That's going to be unlikely, but you may hear that's probably when they're going to blow the horn. They also have a situation where under what's called yard operations, the engineer will blow the horn as they go across. Crossing, that is not going to happen within the city of Bay City. There are no real yard operations here, so you're not going to experience that. So at the end of this process, the quiet zone, once it's established, the locomotive engineers will be directed not to blow the horn. So I think we all agree that's correct. For those who aren't aware, there are two separate lines that run through Bay City. One is the Union Pacific Angleton subdivision. That's the one that kind of runs, I want to say, east-west. We started looking at crossings from in between. You couldn't exclude one particular crossing and say, okay, this one is not part of the quiet zone, but everything else is. It's everything from the start to the end. And there's a requirement that you need to be a quarter mile away from the next nearest crossing in order to not include it. So we thought that these crossings would be the most likely to include. So we started looking at these. The other line is the BNSF Bay City subdivision. I want to go back and mention, as you all are probably aware, there's a lot more traffic on the Pacific line than the BNSF line. There's about 10 to 20 trains a day on the UP line, it seems like. And there's about 2 to 4 trains on the BNSF line. So this one runs generally north-south. Once it crosses the UP line, it turns a little bit. And we went from Golden Avenue all the way down to FM 2668. So we looked at all those crossings within that corridor.
And it was a hot day.
It was a hot day. It was a hot day. So one thing to note, and I'll show the next slide. The BNSF, there are some minimum requirements required in order for a crossing to be in a quiet zone. The BNSF line, there's a handful of crossings that do not have those minimum requirements now. The UP line, all the crossings we looked at have all the minimum requirements. So that's beneficial.
And what that means is when you don't have the minimum requirements, that means the city's going to pay for additional measures and things that need to be done to make those crossings meet the minimum requirements. So each one of those steps adds money to creating this quiet zone. And so one of the end results is we're going to come back and say, this is how much it's going to cost us to do whatever options. This is what it's going to cost the city to do whatever options you and the city council ultimately decide need to be done on the crossings we select for the quiet zone.
Oh, this is louder. Okay. So this slide here talks about the schedule and where we are on the schedule. It's a long schedule. We're here, right? So we really started this about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. Most of the time has been spent emailing the railroads and waiting for them to reply. So finally got responses September or so last year, and then we had to schedule all of the diagnostics for both lines, and we were able to schedule that for October of last year, late October of last year, and then middle to late November of last year. So that's here. So we did the diagnostic meeting. What the diagnostic meeting is all the stakeholders, which included railroad officials, so they had people from their various departments, about 3 or 4 people from each railroad. We had individuals from the Federal Railroad Administration. We had folks from TxDOT there. We had Herb was out there. Other people's stakeholders. We looked at every single one of the crossings and we said, okay, what would we like to see done to this crossing in order to make it a safe, quiet zone crossing? What kind of measures are we going to include? So at every single one of the crossings, we talked about it, we measured it, and we came up with a scenario that we all kind of agreed on that would work. That gets written up in the notes for the diagnostic meeting, and that gets sent out to all the participants. This blurry block right here is develop improvement options and implementation scenarios. That's where we are. The crossing scenarios that we have, most of them are fairly straightforward. There are a couple that Really need some input, figure out which is the best way to move forward. Want to talk a little bit about that tonight. But once we get that nailed down, we'll have a preferred scenario at each one of the crossings. And then the next step, and the critical step, and this really starts the trigger for the timeline with the Federal Railroad Administration, the FRA. It's this notice of intent. This is a notice of intent is also called an NOI. Once that gets issued, that triggers a 60-day comment period for all of the stakeholders, public, railroads, everybody. And those get collected. Once all that stuff gets done, the FRA sits on it and thinks about it for about a year to year and a half. That was where it was about a year ago. We're seeing this creep up. We just have, I think, less people to do it. Anyway, once they look at it and they give us approval that they agree, then start construction for the improvements that are necessary that we came up with during the diagnostic meeting that we put in the notice of intent. Once that's done, then we have what's called the notice of establishment, the NOE. That is, so once all the construction's done, you have the notice of establishment, the NOE, and there's a 21-day implementation period, which is just the start of the clock. The railroads will typically take all 21 days, even though they don't need to. And then the quiet zone comes into effect. So realistically, you're looking at a 2-year process from this point to where they stop moving horns. The construction, this particular came from a slide that was on our project that had a little bit more in-depth construction. I think with our scenarios here, there's not going to be a tremendous amount of time for getting it built. The next 2 slides really go into the minimum requirements. For the Angleton side, the Union Pacific line, as you can see, at every single one of the crossings, we have crossing gates, we have crossing lights, and we have a signal system that's called CWT, it's constant warning timing. That is a requirement on each of the crossings. If you don't have that, you have to install that, which is expensive, or you have to apply for a variance, and those are very hard to get. So it's very fortunate that every single one of our crossings has that. On the BNSF sub, most of them have it, but not all of them have it. So Highway 35 does not have gates. 2668, it's really blurry on the bottom here. It doesn't have any gates. Those happen to be very expensive to install. They're not cheap. So just those 2 alone increase the price probably more than the UP line would be in its entirety. So a little bit about risk analysis. So the next step, once we determine the minimum requirements, what's there, what's not there, then we go into start calculating what the risk within the corridor, the point where it starts, the point where it stops. So within that corridor, what is a safety factor? They call it the number that's generated from the standardized risk analysis formula. That's this thing here. So within the corridor, there'll be, we'll enter in all the data, the traffic data, the how much, what the train has to deal with, what are the existing conditions, and it'll spit out a risk value. All right, let's say that risk value is 1,000. So that's the risk with the train blowing its horn. if you now say, what's the risk without the train blowing the horn? We need to make up the difference by adding additional measures. So if we can be above the current existing situation, then we qualify for a quiet zone. There's another criteria, if you don't quite meet that. There's a national significant risk threshold. It's a average across the country. After you put in your new measures, if you're above that threshold, you qualify for a quiet zone. I think the calculations have come out where we're gonna meet it. It shouldn't be a big issue. But after you take the horn away, you need to add safety measures in order to be safe, as safe as the current situation. Within the corridor, just because we looked at every crossing doesn't mean that safety improvements need to be made at every single crossing. It's a corridor-wide calculation. So you may look at one particular crossing that's just a real nightmare to add the safety measures, and maybe you just have really low traffic volumes. It's just not that big a deal. You could not do any improvements at all and still get the number above where you need to go to qualify. That's not an issue with the crossings we have. I think we're able to kind of pretty much put something together, which is good. But just something to keep in mind that it's a corridor-wide calculation. So we talk about safety improvements. The FRA has standard safety improvements that they've pretty much pre-approved. And they have separate categories. The categorization is really just what they feel is an impact, a level of impact. So category 1 is called a supplemental safety measure. It includes medians, channelization, closing the crossing entirely, one-way streets. So it gets, special. It's a little bit higher, more involved improvement than category 2. Category 2 are alternate safety measures. So when I say medians, these are medians that are between 60 and 100 feet. They prefer 100 feet, but if you can get 60, they'll be okay with it. When I say reduced length, if you can't quite get 60 feet, if you can get 20 feet, you still get credit. Okay? So, but that bumps you down to a different category. 3-quadrant gates, it's not quite as good as a 4-quadrant gate. I think I missed one up here. It's called 4-quadrant gates, but you'll see it in the next slide. And then the other one is wayside horn. For our project, we're mainly focusing on medians and channelization, closure. That's it. So there's a lot here. I just wanted to let you know that there are pre-approved methods to provide supplemental and alternative safety measures. So I'm going to go a little bit into detail on what those are. So 4-quadrant gate, this is category 1. It wasn't on the original bullet or the previous slide. I missed the bullet point, but essentially what this is you have gates on both sides of the track, so you can't have vehicles, so the gate stops, or tries to stop vehicles from scooting around and going on the opposite side. So if you're going against traffic, going across, you'd be seeing people that zigzag around, right? It's intended to avoid that. So you'll have gates on all 4 quadrants of the crossing. That's just that at a crossing, that's about $500,000. That's expensive. We're not proposing those. Medians, I don't know if the photo comes in really well, but this is a raised concrete median. And these are intended to go back, like I said, 100 feet. They want to go back 100 feet. It's intended to stop vehicles from crossing the median to go around the other side. So if you're traveling in this direction, if this gate's down, you're not going to be able to go cross into the other side, and then go against traffic, like we all see in Duke, right? These are $30,000 to $50,000. I have 100 up here, but those are extreme cases. This is called channelization. So if you have seen these barriers up at other crossings. It's typically in the middle of a quiet zone. These are intended to do the same thing as the concrete beams. It's less expensive initially, but these get knocked down all the time. If these get knocked down to the point where they're no longer effective, the railroad or the FRA can notice that and shut the quiet zone, like take away the quiet zone. So they're going to blow horns that day.
Just to add that real quickly, what that means is the city has to be proactive in its maintenance efforts and keep track of that and stay ahead of the railroad, because the railroad won't come and tell us, hey, you need to fix it. They'll just say, you've got a problem and we're going to shut down the quiet zone. So channelization is much more operational maintenance intensive than curb. Curb's more expensive, but long term it maybe saves you in the long haul.
Closure, there's a couple of crossings where I think closure makes a lot of sense in Bay City. We'll go over that, but essentially, you just don't allow cars to go across it. It could be really inexpensive, or you can do some cul-de-sac curbing or some landscaping. So it really kind of depends on what you want to do. One thing to note, the railroads will give you money if you close a crossing.
So does TxDOT.
So does TxDOT, about $50,000 a crossing, depending on the crossing. So, one-way streets, we're not going to have that issue here, but you'll have gates on both sides. I wouldn't recommend that you turn a two-way street into a one-way street, and that's going to give you, safer crossing. It's really set up for one-way streets that currently exist. So going to category 2, these are these alternate safety measures. These are reduced length medians, and I don't know if this photo comes in really clear, but you have the track here, right? And then we have a gate right here. So we have this median that's maybe about 10 feet long. You get credit for that in that calculation. So you'll see as we go through some of the crossings, some of them, we have 20 foot. I think one we have a 15 foot median on one side. On the other side, we have 100. So you get credit for that. So that's good. And then 3 quadrant grades. It's a hybrid between the 4 quadrant grades where you have gates at each of the corners. But you might not be able to put gates on one of the corners, so you would add a median. So this one here, you can 3 gates and then a median. And again, we don't have that issue. The last one, which I generally never like to recommend, is they're called wayside horns. So instead of the locomotive blowing the horn, you'll have a horn on a pole blowing. They put this in the quiet zone. I don't consider this it's quieter zone because it's directed. It's not intended to project everywhere. You can direct it, and so it's not going to affect the area as much, but it's still loud. So that concludes my PowerPoint presentation. What I was going to do next is dive into some of the crossings.
We're going to bring the lights down a little bit to make these easier to see.
So if anybody has any questions with what I went over before I dive into these, I've got a question in the back.
I have one. So when you were showing the slides of where they kind of barricade off so people can't go around, there's quite frequently the arms are just down. There's no train, there's no nothing coming. And they may be down for quite some time, so our only option is either to turn around and go run somewhere or to make our way through. So what happens in that regard? You're stuck.
You're stuck?
Now we're just stuck sitting there, we can't get out.
Reverse.
Well, I mean, if there's other cars.
Yeah, in that scenario, you know, I'll get to it, I think, in one of it. I think there's, what crossing is that? What street is it?
Avenue F would be,
Yeah, that's the one where, so there's a move that BNSF does. They'll go up on theirs and they'll swing around on the UP line. And that probably, it triggers, when it does that, it triggers the gate for the next crossing, even though it never gets there.
I mean, Avenue F is a problem. I mean, I go across Avenue H crossing a lot. I don't know if that's their track or not, but it
Same.
happens a lot on that track,
Okay.
Avenue H. I mean, it's,
That's the one.
because the I is the one where we got triple.
Yep, yep.
Excuse me.
That's gonna be a problem. Avenue H, I think we have medians, so that's gonna be a problem.
Save it, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, just questions?
Just point of information, many people don't know that on each one of these crossings, there's a small little placard. Small little placard that identifies the location and a phone number to call. If you run into that situation, please pick up the phone, they're relatively responsive.
Oh, good. I've never called that number. That's good to know.
Hey, I got here a little late, so if you cover this up, I'm just not up to speed. Why are we so late? When I go through Edna, Wharton, El Campo, they don't honk there. When I go through Pearland, they're not honking. So we're years away, you're saying? Most of us are gonna be dead before this happens? Why are we so late to the ball game? When did we start wanting the quiet zone? Today? 10 years ago? 5 years ago?
We started about a year ago.
Why is that?
So
Jim ran on this when he first got the city council. That was one of his campaign promises. I'm gonna stop the train from honking. That was more than a year ago. Why are we so late? El Campo's not late. Edna's not late. Wharton's not late. Little towns, big town, Pearland, they don't honk in Pearland. Why are we so late to the game?
to the,
Could I just speak on behalf of Jim Foltz, who's a very mild, bashful gentleman? Not. But I know, because I've been involved behind the scenes as well, that Jim, since taking his position on the council, has been one of the key moving forces
I agree.
that got us to this point now.
I
And
agree.
I agree
And this
with
is as
everyone
far as we've
who
gotten
wants.
in 5 years.
But I
We
would
should have
say
a quiet zone already.
we should,
Especially
but our glass is
every
half
intersection
full.
is already prepared.
that's not true.
Well,
That's-
on the east-west it
That's
is.
not what I said.
The north-south doesn't.
It has all the minimum requirements. It does not have any of the additional, the alternate or
Well,
supplemental safety
go to-
measures.
Go to Wharton, go to Edna, and look at the intense systems they have. They don't cost nothing to put that barrier in the middle.
So I'm gonna go back to the schedule.
Anyway,
Um,
we should wait another 5 years, another 2 years. This should be done already.
Were you here for the schedule?
No.
Yeah, you said we're 2 years out from today.
So in the schedule, there's a part of that schedule where we send it in to the FRA.
That should have been done years ago.
Okay, we get your
We
point.
send it to FRA. It's gonna take them 2 years. And it's literally gonna take them 2 years to not look at it and put a stamp on it. That's just the way it is. And I wish it wasn't that way, but that's the way it is. Once they're done with it, do the improvements. That should not take that long, because I agree with you, it should go pretty quick. Then you send it over to the railroad, and they take 3 weeks, when it shouldn't take that long. They're not gonna do anything, and they're just gonna wait it out, and then it'll go. So,
My
back to the
original
schedule.
question was, why are we so late to the game?
I can't answer.
Simple. Meredith.
But we're in a situation where the schedule is not dictated by anybody in this room. So, that's where we are now. So, we are on, so this is on the UP line, this is on the far west edge, Avenue A, B, Avenue C, here's the railroad line, right? So during the diagnostics, we concluded that medians here made the most sense. On the north side, we were able to put the minimum 100-foot median all the way. On the south side, we're looking at, I think between 15 and 20-foot medians. Because of First Street. The way it's set up, you can't block a street from turning left, so we can't really extend it longer than that, but we get credit for these numbers. There's some thought on using concrete medians. If we do concrete medians, we're probably gonna have to end up putting in curb and gutter on either side. And so that's in discussion, trying to figure out if we need to do that. Again, the concrete medians are gonna, once you install them, they basically don't need any maintenance. So there's a benefit. I can zoom in. I know these are really easy to read from back where you guys are.
Zoom in on the church because we visited with them.
We're good? So, we're looking at putting in some curb and gutter around this way to help direct traffic. It also gives us an opportunity to add pavement that gets closer to these gates. If we add curb, we can get closer, we can get the travel way closer to the gate. And in order for us to make a median that is effective and not crossing over, they really kind of need to be about 2 feet wide. And these are about 22 feet wide roads, so we have 11-foot lanes. And we really,
I'd like to add here, as part of this process, we recognized that there were several stakeholders that we wanted to be mindful of. And this is the perfect example, I believe it's the Baptist church there. And we actually went and visited with them on site. And we showed them this diagram and talked about it and got their input. They were actually very supportive in liking what they saw in terms of what we recommended.
and Highway 60, we kind of have the same scenario. The geometry is a little bit different of the median. It's a little bit wider. So this median here is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit wider, not really bigger. It's not really longer. So we have a 60-foot median on the north side, roughly about a 20-foot median on the south side. So again, we don't have the full length on the south side, but we still get credit. This is still okay. This will still count.
Another comment I have to jump in here. On the west side, we have Enterprise. On the east side, we have the Chinese restaurant. Again, we visited with both of those establishments and talked to their owners. And we originally had talked about the potential of the 100-foot median, but that would have had a very negative impact on both of those businesses. They clearly expressed that to us, but fortunately we found out before even meeting with them that we didn't need to do a 100-foot median to meet the minimum requirements.
So this next slide shows an option for Avenue I. This includes 100-foot medians on either side. There's a concern if we do it this way, that BNSF line that comes this way, it's gonna need a lot of improvements. If we leave Avenue I open, there's gonna be some signal improvements that are gonna be needed on the railroad line to upgrade their system. If we close Avenue I, just flat out close it, there's zero signal improvements needed along this line. And we don't have to add any medians or anything like that. So this is a easy, it's, fairly straightforward solution, but when you close Avenue I. I don't know how much of a struggle that would be, but that would, if we included that, if we left it open and included in the quiet zone corridor, that would probably be half the cost of all the improvements. So, plus you don't get the credit, you don't get the check from Union Pacific. So, I did not talk about Avenue H. We were able to get the full 100 feet on both sides. Avenue H. Avenue K, we got 100 feet on the north side, and we had 36 feet on the south side. Again, every foot we get on the south side still counts. We still get credit for it. It all goes to total. So you'll notice each one of these on the north side, we're getting pretty much full length medians. That really adds to our credits. So this is really good. This is a different alternate on Avenue K. Looking at improving First Street and how this comes in. I'm not sure if we're going to include that or not, but there's just a different option. It doesn't really impact the light or the quiet zone. Improve the safety improvements. So Cottonwood, we got full 100-foot medians on either side. Interesting note on using medians. You can't really extend them past a commercial driveway, but you can extend them past a residential driveway without any issue. So you'll see that we extended them back on some of the residential properties. Nicholas, 100 feet both sides, again, getting a lot of credits. These can either be concrete or channelization. Norvell's a little tricky. It's a particularly challenging crossing because it's humped up significantly. It's got a bit of a skew right at the track, so you don't really quite know what that skew is until you get up and over. We're able to put 100 feet either side. The diagnostic team really stressed that closure of Norvell would be a pretty good option, just because of the way the geometry is.
This is a very dangerous crossing. And putting in channelization or curb and gutter is going to narrow the road right away even more, and you've got steep bar ditches on either side, especially on the south side. And the other challenge is the city limit is at the center of the tracks, and then you're in the county. So you've got two different entities that play into this whole decision. So this is why we're recommending the potential closure.
The last crossing we looked at here was the closing option. The last one is 2668, again, 100 foot either
That's
side.
457.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Be able to get, 100 foot medians on either side. So, going back to, conversation about Norvell, there's another alternative. We can reduce the corridor length, basically exclude 457 and Norvell, still be part of the quiet zone on every other crossing, so the trains would blow their horn at 457, they blow their horn at Norvell, but they would stop on all the other crossings. That eliminates the challenges we have closing Norvell, that's an access issue. It also reduces the cost required to build improvements along this particular crossing. Because of the skew, the crossing ends up, or the medians end up being about 126 feet long, because you need 100 feet from the gate all the way to the end of the median, and the median needs to extend all the way to about 5 feet in front of the track. So that just adds a lot of length. So there's that option that you exclude the last two, the eastmost crossings. So that's an option. Those are the crossings on the UP line. Any questions?
Which one is this one? Back behind Walmart?
Yeah.
So what keeps people from, if they go up the road and they have to make a right-hand turn and then a U-turn after they get past the 100 foot to go left or right?
So that it would stop here, right? So this driveway here, they would have to turn right.
And then make a U-turn right there in the middle of,
You would hope they would make a U-turn.
or where's Bucks Bayou? Is that Bucks Bayou?
It's further to the right. That's McDonald's, McDonald's is there.
So it won't extend past this.
Past that. So again, you can block a residential driveway, but you can't block a commercial.
Yes.
But isn't it illegal to make a U-turn across the double yellow line there?
Oh, yeah, it would be illegal.
Pardon?
It would be illegal.
Yes.
It's also illegal to zip around
Yeah.
big gates.
But I mean, if that resident turned right and made a U-turn, that's an illegal U-turn across the double yellow line.
Yes.
Yeah, we're solving one problem, creating another.
The option two is to,
Exclude.
well, exclude it entirely, but if there was concerns about that, get rid of this median. That's an option too. I think we look at it, I don't know the ownership, but I wasn't sure if they'd be able to move their driveway out to here. I'm not sure. Okay. So I think, that was fairly straightforward from, improvements. How those crossings kind of came together. The BNSF line is not the same. It's a little bit more challenging. Again, these are going from Golden all the way down to, is it 2668 on the south side? The last crossing? Okay. The last couple on the south end are a little challenging. We have some options. On Golden, we looked at 43-foot median on this side, 33-foot median on this side. We didn't want to block Avenue J, or this road here. And then we had to stop it before this thing is a U-Haul, right?
Yeah.
So, not quite 100 foot, but we still get credit. On Grace, same approach, we're talking medians, 100 foot on the west side, and I think we had 50 feet on the east side. Again, we didn't want to block that.
I will quickly add one of the things that we did with our street and bridge crew, while we were going through these diagnostics, we recognized where we were missing signs that the railroad requires, as well as stop bars, so we addressed those as we went and corrected it.
13th Street, again, medians, both on 13th Street and 12th Street, varying length. I think we got 100 feet on both of these. On 9th Street, we had no medians. Well, looked at a couple different options on this one. Just medians, keeping 9th Street open. We also looked at closing 9th Street. Again, you get money from the road. They basically said they'd write you a check for $50,000. And they're almost ready to get it to you there. So that's an option on 9th Street. So either we put in some medians or we close it. We thought 9th Street was the best solution. I think 9th and 8th. 9th was the most challenging because of this driveway. So we didn't get as many credits here. We do get some credits here on 8th.
The other reason is because 9th Street, you have a minimal amount of traffic that uses that crossing anyway, whereas 8th and 6th serve as an alternate route for traffic to get off of 7th.
So Highway 35, it has no gates now, so we have to install the gates. Remember, we looked at adding medians. Medians are pretty fat, not the 2-foot variations that we were looking at before. Look what we have. We weren't quite able to get 100 feet over here. We got 90 feet, and we got 42 feet over here. Now, one thing to note, the way the calculations work, if you have a lot of volume, traffic volume, every foot you get on median length or whatever really adds to the overall corridor value. So, we're looking to extend these as much as possible. But still, we have to add gates, and these are, complete signal upgrades for Highway 35. 6th Street, we had 100 feet on the west side, 20 feet on the east side. I know this is blurring up my eyes. Fourth Street, we had about 60 feet on the east side, 100 feet on the west side. 3rd Street, we had about 100 feet on the west side, about 60 feet on the east side.
Is there any consideration of problems with heavy haul vehicles coming through with a median in the middle of the road now?
The idea would be to keep the lane width the same width it is now. So on some of these, I can't remember what the width was. I think we had more width on the lettered streets than we had on the, or avenue.
You got more width on the avenues than you do on the streets.
That's right. So I think we have enough width there. Forget what the existing width is, but the concrete medians take about 2 feet away from the overall street width. But if you had 25 feet, you'd still have, you know,
We possibly have to look at adding a couple feet of asphalt on either side. It's within the right of way. It's just a matter
yeah.
of building up the basin and then putting in the asphalt if it's required, but that'd only be in conjunction with the length of the median.
I just didn't know how when they go traveling down the road now, they lift up the streetlights, right? But now with the new streetlights, I don't know, do they crisscross to get through there, or the?
Well, hopefully that'll all get straightened out as we go through remarking.
Any thought on closing Third?
We hadn't talked about it, but we will certainly take the comment and look at it.
WK, weren't quite able to get full 100 feet on either side, but if you do get 60 feet, it's the same as 100 feet. So. All right, here's the fun one. So Cottonwood, medians on either side, we couldn't quite get a full length median on the south side, obvious reasons. So as the track goes east of Cottonwood, there's a series of what they're called private crossings. They're handled really strangely in a quiet zone. But I think we all agree that we need to kind of figure out a solution. I forget what the next one. So what we came up with, and I thought it was a pretty good idea, is there's this red mark here. This red mark here are existing private crossings, right? This one goes into this house. This one goes into the trailer complex. So we thought about closing both of these, but we need to be able to provide access for the folks, right? So the thought would be to make a new crossing here, and line up with Live Oak, make it a public crossing, provide access to here, and then also get access over here. This is not a cheap option, but I don't think quiet zone is going to fly unless we come up with a solution, because even though this is called a private crossing, it's a private crossing that acts like a public crossing. It's actually quite busy. Most of the private crossings are like this, where it's a residential. You got, what, 8 cars a day maybe if they're really busy. You know, this has a couple hundred on me a day. And so the risk is significant if you stop loading the homes. This is a pretty expensive proposition. All of this would, you know, it's probably at least $1 million just dealing with this. Yes?
What if you came in from Cottonwood and didn't do crossing at all? What if you bought the property,
Here, this way?
you know, up against the track?
This way?
Yes.
Yeah, you can do that. You'd have to get,
If you're talking about $1 million this way, if you just buy the property and easement to the property there, and you put a road in to the house that
Yeah.
you're addressing and the trailer park, then you wouldn't need another railroad crossing
Yeah.
at all.
still close the easement instead of doing this, go out this way. That's a
Yes.
good idea. Or we have thought about doing something similar, but going in the back. So. That's good. It's a good recommendation. Should have had you out there on the diagnostic.
Y'all never cross,
Say again?
y'all never cross.
No.
Put a highway in front of their house.
There is another private crossing just to the east of the last slide. This is this little property here, this little section here, we recommend closing that as well. Just didn't show up on that. And the last one is 2668 Nichols. We're looking at adding medians. We really, in addition to that, we really needed to find a way to define how traffic comes in and out of this business. With this driveway that's right here, I think it's going to be really easy for them to just zip across this way here, especially since this is on a curve. You know, if their train's not blowing their horn, and all you have is these lights, it would be very easy for someone to go, ooh, I'm just going to zip across there. So I think, you know, we talked about it in the last meeting, we'd look at maybe relocating this driveway over here. So, I'm going to go back. One of the thoughts I had, when we talk about corridors, there's a chance, I forget what crossing it is, but there's a chance to eliminate the 2668 crossing, these crossings. We would have to eliminate this crossing because it's so close in proximity. I think it goes all the way up to, I think we would be able to include 3rd Avenue in the study. So from 3rd Avenue north, we'd be able to create a quiet zone. With a lot less expense if we didn't have to consider rebuilding all the, or taking out all those crossings and doing all the work that's south of 3rd Street, which is, you know, that's an option.
How much are you budgeting for the Highway 35 crossing? Just considering what you said about it's cheap, north of 3rd Street, that includes the Highway 35.
It's still, you still have 35, so that's still gonna be probably $500,000.
Only half.
But you don't have all the street improvements that we would have to do, and all the right-of-way you would have to purchase on those private crossings.
Thank you.
If you hadn't noticed, I believe the BNSF quiet zone is going to cost a lot more money than the Union Pacific quiet zone because of all the improvements necessary, not just to meet the minimum standards, but to add on to the safety measures. So 4 trains a day, maybe 4 or 5 times the cost, something like that.
Does the railroad have no obligation to have, it seems like BNSF's minimum safety standard is lower than Union Pacific. Do they not have an obligation?
No, it's not that it's lower. One, the line is a completely different type of railroad line. So the Angleton sub, the Union Pacific Angleton sub, they go through a lot faster. You probably noticed that, right? So because they have a lot of trains that go through there and they go through at a decent speed, they have all of the minimum requirements already. For the BNSF line, they're not going through at that speed. They crawl through town, and they're able to, it's not that necessarily that it's less safe, it just doesn't meet the minimum requirements. Yes.
BNSF has one customer on the north side of 7th Street. One customer. Other than that, they just use the railroad out there to park their cars overnight.
Yes.
They're not, I don't feel like, I think we ought to close the whole track and let the customer truck over to his place. But we've got one customer that's there, and that's the only thing we got there.
So, you're right. Unfortunately, they have that customer there, and they're required to serve that customer. It's not BNSF says, look, we're done dealing with you. They don't get that choice, because they have to basically if there's a customer that wants to get on their network, they have to grant them.
And the other bad thing about that is the making that turn, sometimes, and I've been there when there's been fires and other things, when they're blocking both highways, 35 and F,
Yes.
because they're making the turn and they stop.
Yes.
And, you know, I know a fireman that actually had an accident, trying to get to the fire station because of that. And, you know, I'm sorry, but I think we ought to see if we can get our governor to close down the NSF more.
That would be difficult. So the cars that they park, you know, if we figure out a way to get them to park somewhere else, then you don't have them shuttling cars up and down.
Yeah.
I think they're still gonna have to serve that customer. I don't know what kind of volumes that is, but let's say that they get a delivery once a week, this country a week, versus, you know, 2 or 3 a day.
So there's talk right now about another rail line from, say, the Oxaya area to Lyondell. And those are the cars that are in the storage area. Is it possible that those cars would now be stored south of town rather than north of town? Or do we know?
If it's the same cars and they have somewhere else to park it, yeah, it's possible.
And then my next question would be, are you suggesting that maybe we shouldn't consider BNSF for a quiet zone and focus on the UP line?
Based on the conditions now, you have a lot of improvements that you're gonna have to do to get the minimum requirements on the BNSF line for 2 to 4 trains a day. The UP is, I think, a slam dunk from a cost perspective and a value perspective. You get 20 trains a day, possibly not blowing the horn, that's gonna make a huge difference.
Yeah. And the BNSF, it seems like those are daytime trains, not night trains.
Yeah, you do better. Yeah, you do better.
Thank you.
Here's my question, my question is, have we had any conversation with this one customer as to what this is doing to the city? I mean, wouldn't that be the next logical step, to just have a conversation with them, bring them to the table?
We haven't had it yet, but yes, that would be logical.
Remember, like he said, BNSF still uses it to store cars. So you lose that customer, BNSF is still gonna use the truck.
I thought I read, or someone told me that when they make the track from Oxaya to Lyondale, that would cut out about 90% of them trains and cars in Bay City. So that would help reduce that on BNSF.
Yeah, if those cars go somewhere else, from a railroad operations perspective, I bet you BNSF does not want to crawl through Bay City to store cars.
You talk about closing Norvell. I'd rather see HRI close and keep Norvell open, because Norvell, if trains are blocking in town, sometimes you can go to Norvell and get a route.
That makes sense.
Which would be why we would consider not doing anything on both the Norvell and the,
I'd rather
457, just exclude them from the study.
I'd rather have them in it, and that way you're not honking horns anytime. Otherwise, there's still gonna be honking horns coming into town.
They would, so if you look at a westbound train, it's coming in, they're gonna start blowing the horn before they get to the crossing, so, 800 feet, 1,000 feet, and then an eastbound train will be 800 feet, 1,000 feet west of the crossing. So, once you get past that point, I think Norvell is the furthest east crossing, right? So if that's out of the corridor, out of the quiet zone, they won't start blowing the horn until about 800 feet, 1,000 feet in front of the next crossing. I can't remember which one it was.
457.
457, so.
So they would would still be blowing their horns about Avenue F.
Yeah, just before, wait,
I mean, Norvell and 457, you're defeating your purpose of doing this.
remember, they gotta blow their horn for every crossing, right? So if they stop, bear with me. Okay, right? Yeah, so just before 2668, is that correct? That would be the furthest east, if we excluded Norvell. 2668 would be the furthest east, so they would blow their horn at Norvell, and then stop blowing their horn at all.
No, but they gotta blow it before they get to Norvell.
Right.
So they're gonna be blowing it when they're coming through town.
They're gonna be 1,000 feet east of, west of there on an eastbound train blowing their horn while they're in Bay City.
I would. So, they'll start blowing the horn about here, right? On this one. And if they're leaving, start blowing the horn about here. No, I'm sorry. They'll blow their horn here and here, right around the road.
Where's Russell Ranch?
You're saying they can blow it 800 feet in front of that, before that.
Yeah, it's 15 to 20 seconds, whatever that distance is.
So they're gonna be blowing it at Nichols or even before.
You should be able to, this is, I think, a half a mile.
But they don't start at 800 feet before it.
Whatever that distance is. So they need to, if this is not included in the quiet zone, they need to blow the horn before they cross. Whatever that distance is, whatever their speed is, to allow anybody on that crossing to know that that train's coming 20 seconds ahead.
Where Norvell intersects 35 on the north side is the new Russell Ranch subdivision that's gonna be hearing all of these train whistles.
Yeah, can we include it? That's one of the things we gotta decide where it gets included, doesn't get included, but there are challenges with this crossing. To include.
One of the other things I don't understand is when they're crossing a crossing, and they get past the crossing and they're still honking their horn 4 or 5 times. I'm like, they're past the crossing, why are they still honking their horn?
Because they pass this crossing, they gotta get to that crossing.
I'm talking about like at Norvell, they've crossed Norvell and still honking their horn, 4 or 5 times after they cross.
Because again,
They didn't quite finish their horn blowing experience, so they had to make sure it didn't all in.
There's some requirements on horn blowing. I don't know it, but I am astonished at how, I swear, some of the engineers take out their frustrations. You guys probably know more than I do, but I can hear, I live in Houston, and I can hear, there's one engineer that just does not like his job. Well, it's not honk, it's blows the whole thing all the way through the crossing. Make sure everybody knows he's there.
Another dynamic which might have something to do with train experience in the future will be Lodestar, or whether or not they choose to continue to marshal cars in Bay City, or they move them out to the new Lodestar experience.
I think the Lodestar is off of the Union Pacific line.
Yes.
I don't think that's going to affect what the effect is.
Just for the record, I'm not necessarily for closing any of our crossings. Not because I care that much, but because we don't know how our city will develop. And we're making decisions that will never be changed back. The railroad is never going to give us more. They will only give us less. And we'll be making decisions for the rest of the experience that Bay City has. So I'm not necessarily for the closures. In addition, it causes lots of trouble with our services, trying to get through with emergency management and or trash, any kind of service. So that's part of the reason I'm not necessarily for any closures. And I think $50,000 is a great large amount of money, but at this particular time, it might not be worth it.
Yeah, they offer the money for a reason. They don't like crossings. It's a risk for them. It's a risk for them. The FRA has a grant program that pays for communities to close crossings. They are, it's a major consideration, safety and risk consideration for railroads. They're dangerous, necessary. They are dangerous, but yeah, most likely, if we close FAY, you're not going to get it back.
These curbs that we put in the middle of the street, what's the size of them, or
2
how
feet
sharp
wide.
are they? Are
2 feet wide. We really need to be at least 8 inches high.
so enough that a car can,
The old
as
ones
you're
have-
driving along and the sun's shining into your eyes, and you can't see, and you drift a little, and next thing you blow a tire or take out a transmission. And,
Yeah, they're intended to not be driven. Yeah, they're not on purpose.
yeah, so, east and west, when the sun's shining and you get a little drifter, next thing you know,
So
do they create more of that kind of a hassle in cities of cars? Next thing you know, we got cars hitting them and breaking down all the time just because someone drifted a little?
what are the vehicular speeds on? How fast do you go across? Having that?
I think most of us would rather see the cone things up than they would, because you're not gonna hit one of those and total out your car,
Yeah.
There's a cost factor both ways.
The issue Herb's gonna have is when you hit that, your car's not totaled, but that's gotta get replaced, and they're not cheap. Made of plastic, you look at it like that, and how expensive is that? They're crazy expensive. Like $25, $30 a foot. But it's a time thing. You gotta order it if you don't have it on staff, on hand, and then you gotta install it.
So these, like, in front of McDonald's, just say for instance, I don't know the streets or whatnot, but if you got 100 foot either way, now you're stopped and it broke, or the train's sitting there, whatever. And how do people turn around and do what they gotta do now?
In that scenario, they are gonna be stopped. So a train is blocked the crossing. They stopped, they're not moving, it's been an hour. You're gonna have to reverse out, because you're not gonna climb over that median.
So an ambulance coming along and stops, gets in traffic at the right time, and
Yep.
we just call one from another part of town because you can't turn around and.
Well, the crossing is blocked. It's gonna happen no matter what, right?
well, Union Pacific very seldom stops. It's probably
Yeah, so, yeah.
stops.
It's too bad you can't have big enough bars that block the road. And if something happens, we call our police, they go over there and hit a button and go, pop the gates open and direct traffic, and, now we got curbs and cars stuck and.
Well, we have gates. That's part of it. But gates on just either side stop traffic in one direction. Doesn't stop the people from zigging around and going around. And if you're not blowing your horn, you reduce the safety of the crossing. The FRA is saying, well, we need to make that up somehow.
Right.
And this is the way to make it.
Understand.
Anything else, Herb, that we need to go over?
Not on my list.
Question?
Do you have a price range on the BNSF line, what the minimum maximum cost is?
It's gonna be over $1 million, probably a couple million on the BNSF line. There's actually gonna be a lot of improvements that the railroad has to make on their line. I do not have a price tag for that. I even want to estimate that.
I guess what I'm wondering, is it on you guys' radar, if there is this one customer that line serves, and there's some shuffling of cars, is it on our radar? Are we thinking outside the box of doing this path, and maybe talking to the, I guess Scott Sheik and say, hey, can we incent you for $500,000 to move your operation, or something like that, or yeah.
I think you're talking about items that the council is going to have to discuss and decide upon.
Is it on the radar, is what I'm asking?
Everything's on the radar.
Okay.
That's why we're here.
Good.
Next.
Good.
Yeah, we have a city council workshop at 4:30 on Tuesday to continue this discussion. We show a lot of the same information and talk about it again, so.
So we have the choice to live with the evil we know instead of the one we don't know?
I'm sorry?
We have the choice to live with the evil that we know instead of the one we don't know?
Well, I think if you can take your eyes off of Bay City and look outside of Bay City, other cities have invoked quiet zones and are using them quite successfully.
Well said.
Angleton, Morton, I think this gentleman back here identified quite a few.
El Campo.
And why haven't we done something sooner? Well, I've only been here 18 months, and I'll tell you what I've been doing for 18 months.
Thank you.
Sir, to answer that question is, every year we sit down, we make a plan. Every 5 years we sit down and update our plans. Everything gets prioritized. It's a tough gig to try to determine what to put first, how to go about making the decision of what to put our money on. And
That train honking is a big deal for everybody in the whole town. Put another line item on their taxes, just like Parks and Rec or whatever, charge whatever you want, just make the train stop honking.
a lot of us feel the same way.
But to go further with the explanation, you're right. I ran for that 5 years ago, and I've been pushing for it for those 5 years.
I can hear you, Jim.
But every year, you gotta make a budget, you gotta prioritize it, and let's talk about Hammond, down by Hammond Road. We prioritize not flooding people's houses over having a quiet zone.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of things we have to run.
Well, we should work on the 20 trains a day one and not worry
Yes.
about the 4 trains a day.
Yeah, and I think that's how we're gonna do it. And one of the questions, I think, was that we didn't have to do everything in one shot. We could actually do a stair-step type methodology to implement this.
Yeah, so if you wanted to do, we got a couple of crossings on the ends, right? You can't do them in the middle. And then you realize later on, yeah, we really need that quiet zone to be extended more as you point out. You can always go through this process again. It's the same process. It's a long process. I do want to make one point. The process is long and it's painful, and it's that way for a reason. Both the FRA and the railroads don't like quiet zones. They prefer not to have quiet zones. They drag their feet, and they do what they need to do because they're required to do it. And the FRA has set up this process so that communities like Bay City, when you're fed up with the horns, there's a path forward. But both the FRA and the railroads typically consider quiet zones to be less safe. So it's a problem, but there is a problem. There is a process in that.
In the consulting process and figuring out the cost of this, are you guys looking at increased property values, or we have reduced property values because of proximity to train and noise? Because I can tell you, as an appraisal board member, we have a lot of people that come to us and say, train noise devalues my property, and we reduce their property values to compensate for the train noise. So when we're looking at the cost of this as a community, are we looking at recouping some of that from being able to increase property values of properties that are less diminished by the noise?
That is not in my tech. I'm looking at it strictly from how much it costs to install it.
I know of 3 people, just myself, that have had houses for sale fairly close to the railroad track. Actually, one not next to the railroad track, and they were gonna sell them. People were interested, and then when they were there, the train horn started blowing, and we're not buying your house, we're out here. You know,
Yeah.
so that's one of the main things.
I'll agree with that.
Ditto.
Well, I'd say this, we certainly appreciate your time. We know you have plenty to do on your schedule, and I know there's a movie coming that's starting pretty soon, so. What I would say, I know Scotty's gonna ask you if anybody wants to send some additional email input, if you can send that to the city manager's office, and then we'll get it to whoever needs to get it.
Yes, it was good to hear a lot of comments about how does things get prioritized. We have capital planning, we're in budget season, and we have public input and public hearings. So if you want to get more involved in the process, and I hope everybody's watching on the video as well, because we want to get turnout. It's amazing when we have these public hearings at our capital planning, we have very few people that show up. So today, I was so excited to see people coming into our town hall. So in this public input, if you have more input, or you get home and start thinking about more things, and for those that are watching on the video or watching it later, you can send more comments to city manager at cityofbaycity.org, and I can pass those along to our council and to our public works department to get that information out. And also a reminder again, this coming Tuesday at our workshop at 4:30, we're going to be talking about the same information that all of council should be there. Okay?
What's our app, basically?
Oh, the C-Clip Fix app. It's basically TX for you. We have an app. And that's another thing we're trying to get out there more, where you can report service orders.
Report a pothole.
And again, thank you for all coming.